Hey everyone, today I want to take a look at Deep Rock Galactic's Deadzones as well as offer some requests for improvements. So starting with the camera uses about a 27% rounded square dead zone for default. There's some restricted diagonal movement because of the axial dead zone, about 6%. It's more obvious looking straight up or down. You have to break out of this threshold before you start seeing diagonal movement occur. This is also what's probably warping this circular portion of the dead zone to create this rounded square shape. There is an acceleration jump if you have acceleration enabled. So you can see that once you get past this threshold, that's when that triggers. The vertical and horizontal sensitivities are different. It's not too obvious right now, but I'll show another example during actual missions. It becomes quite a bit more obvious, but they are different, and that creates a couple issues I'll get to in that section. Movement uses just a square dead zone, so you have to move out of the square region before you start seeing movement occur. And it has quite a bit of restricted diagonal movement because of how large it is. And you can see, if I just trace the dead zone, when diagonal movement is occurring and when only cardinal movement is occurring. The shaded region represents when you can sprint. This is the sprint threshold. So if you try sprinting when your stick is under this region, nothing will happen, and when you're over this, you're allowed to sprint. And you just have to exit the shaded region to stop. And because of this, you can sprint pretty much almost perfectly horizontally. Now this game does offer dead zone options, so let's do the largest one, 100%, and for, let me change the graphs. So the largest camera dead zone is about 52%. And you'll see that the axial dead zone hasn't changed, so the dead zone looks a little more circular right now, though it's still being warped a bit. And it pushes out the acceleration jump range just a bit. Now, with the square dead zone, as you can see, you have even more restricted diagonal movement, because that's just what square dead zones do. So you have very little diagonal movement available to you. What's interesting is that the sprint threshold hasn't changed, and if you'll notice, just moving beyond the dead zone has us start moving faster than we were before. I'll be showing that a little clearer, but this is max dead zone, how fast you move at minimum. But because the sprint threshold hasn't changed, you can sprint immediately once you're past this dead zone, and because it's the same, you can move almost perfectly horizontally and trigger a sprint. And it isn't until you kind of break back under this vertical dead zone where that stops. Now moving to the smallest dead zone. For the camera, it's about 10%, and here you can actually see with the circular portion of the dead zone being so small, this looks quite a bit more squarish. And movement is about a 20% square at this setting. So you can see you have quite a bit more diagonal movement to work with. And as I was comparing before, you can see that the starting movement speed is quite a bit slower. And the sprint threshold remains unchanged, but you can actually break out of it now much sooner. Or I mean, yeah. So you can't move as horizontally as you could and maintain a sprint. The last dead zone I want to mention is the menu cursor. So this is actually a perfect circle, and it doesn't seem to be affected by the dead zone options, which sort of makes sense, so players don't maybe accidentally get drift or whatever. But so you can see it's perfectly circular, and it has no restricted diagonal movement, so you can kind of see movements right around the axes will result in diagonal movement. And that's really what we want to see for both movement and aiming, just a perfect circular dead zone. For aiming, it's not too bad. 6% isn't too much restricted diagonal movement, but full diagonal movement would be better, and especially for movement, because I mean, movements gets quite a bit worse if you need to increase the dead zone for whatever reason, and having a circular dead zone with full diagonal movement allows you to maintain, lets you use large dead zones without restricting any diagonal movement. So it'd be nice to see a circular dead zone changed, or the square dead zones removed or changed to circular dead zones. Additionally, it would be nice to have separate dead zone sliders for the camera and movement, and maybe another one for the menu cursor, so that you can change these individually and maybe let them go all the way down to 0. So if players want to use a 15% movement dead zone or 10% movement dead zone, they could access that while using whatever camera dead zone they'd like. And the next thing I want to mention, I'll show this more in an actual mission. There is aim assist in this game, and it takes the form of kind of slowdown, and this occurs with enemies, interactable prompts, or with the menu cursor when you pass over icons. So it's a little difficult to see. It's something you definitely more feel. But when you pass over icons or whatever, the cursor will slow down, or your camera will slow down. So let me see if this applies here. So if you can maybe see that the cursor slows down when passing over, and that of course happens to enemies. I'll show that in game as well, but there's no option to control this or disable this, and one of the frustrating things that can happen is it just feels kind of janky, where your aim sensitivity just keeps changing as you're passing over things, especially in combat when there's a lot of enemies. Your sensitivity is constantly changing from being slowed down to normal, and when you're aiming on an enemy, you have to overcorrect to counter the aim assist, which is pretty frustrating when you know it takes a certain amount of stick movement to make an adjustment from, say, an enemy's arm to their face or weak spot, but you have to overcorrect to keep compensating for that. So an option to toggle aim assist would be appreciated, so that when it's on, it's just default. When it's off, it disables every bit of aim assist in the menus, on terminals, and on enemies. So now I'm going to try to demonstrate this in a mission. Alright, so we're in a game, or in a mission right now, and I want to demonstrate the vertical and horizontal sensitivity. So you can see this is the horizontal sensitivity, and this is the vertical sensitivity. It's still might not be too clear, but it is pretty different. And this both feels awkward because they're different, and especially in a game as vertical as this. But what differing sensitivities mean is that your diagonal movement is also affected. So if you point your stick at a 45-degree angle, you probably can see this right now. It's much more shallow than that. It's much more horizontally biased than that. You can actually see the next thing, the aim assist being applied. Let me turn over here. So So having differing X and Y sensitivities both makes it awkward because they're different. Your vertical sensitivity is lower than your horizontal, but this game's also very vertical, and your diagonal movement has changed. So on top of having a slower vertical sensitivity, um,
Lighting up!
your angles are changed so that they're more horizontally biased. So if you're trying to move up and down, it doesn't feel as good as it should with them being the same. Now I found a loop bug here because this is a good test for the aim assist being applied. So if I move as my cursor passes over them, you can see the sensitivity drop, and that loop bug is death wish. But goodbye loop bug, come on my test. But you could see that the Molly has the same exact aim assist. So if I pass the cursor over this or any other enemy, you can see that it's slowing down, and I have to make larger corrections. So if I'm making movements while on here, you can see that those movements are slower and they're faster when not. And that just becomes pretty tedious when trying to make consistent adjustments, because you're always trying to adapt to constantly changing sensitivities. So yeah, but hopefully I've shown that the horizontal sensitivity is a little more obviously faster than the vertical sensitivity in game, even though it wasn't in the hub. So to go over everything again, it'd be nice to see separate inner dead zones options for the camera, the movement, and the cursor. Make the horizontal and vertical sensitivities even, or maybe even just add sliders for it, so that players can customize that on their own, and an aim assist toggle. That'll make Deep Rock feel quite a bit better with the controller, and certainly for us console users. Thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day.